everyone. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. It is once again me, the notoriously sanctimonious RMB, coming at you here on a Tuesday. I'm a year older. I feel it. I feel like I'm a year older today. Welcome to all you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Thank you for all the great birthday wishes and letters. Somebody even a viewer sent me happy birthday in Klingon. And I was actually going to read it. And I have to find out how to pronounce it correctly. I didn't want to make an ass of myself reading, not knowing how to speak Klingon correctly. A lot of stuff going on. You know, that first picture leaked of Jean-Luc Picard, I guess, at Starfleet headquarters. And they're wearing Next Generation uniforms, but not First Contact uniforms. I don't know. You know, these are things. And they're wearing those uniforms how many years later? 20 years later? 30 years later? Of course, they could change things. Can't complain about it yet. I'm not going to complain about the Picard series until I've seen it. I promise you. I've just only heard about the tumult in the writer's room. Well, anyway, I've been getting a lot of great letters. I've been getting more letters from ladies. According to my YouTube analytics, 97% of my viewers are male. So when I get a letter from a woman, I love that. And I think that's great. And as you all know, I love getting letters. And if you want to write me letters, please send them to me at my website, the Burnettwork. And every letter is welcome. And if you don't want me to read it on the air, please say so. And also, if you do want me to read it on the air, please say so. And remember, this podcast is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products. For those men who want to look good and feel great. I just used their face wash. I always use it on my face before I go on. So I actually do use Lucky Tiger products. I really enjoy them. And I'm happy that they sponsor this podcast. And if you want to go to getluckytiger.com, you can actually get 20% off at checkout by using the code PGS for Post-Geek Singularity and get 20% off your order from Lucky Tiger. Now I'm going to read letters. This first letter I'm going to put on my smudgy glasses because I'm older now. So this one comes from Catherine Cook. Catherine Cook sends me this letter. Hey, Rob, longtime fan. I noticed that some of your recent Robservations chats have had the recurring theme of lazy writing, fan service, verisimilitude, and storytelling, etc. From all that and a story you and John Campea covered about what may have become of Rian Johnson's Star Wars project, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the influence outrage culture may be having on the productions themselves, if at all. Or more to the point, why are so many formerly reasonable pundits convinced that years of business logic will be abandoned just because of some fan outrage? I believe the advent of social media is allowing toxicity and outrage culture to take off, but it's certainly not anything new. As a Star Wars fan, I know toxicity has sadly been an ugly side of the fandom since going back to the holiday special in 1978. As bad as that was, the toxicity was worse. But since The Last Jedi's release, many across social media and online movie punditry act like toxicity is something new that needs to be addressed by ousting the creatives responsible for those properties. Often when they use the word divisive, it's clear what they're really saying is they don't like it, so obviously it's a problem. I find this is a symptom of outrage culture. I was discouraged to find that the majority of the complaints over The Last Jedi were more related to people's fan theories not paying off than actual critiques of the film. For the record, I agree with you for the most part on the sequel trilogy, despite still getting some enjoyment out of it. Though when you compare the other films by J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson and see how different they are, then the odds that they both just happen to make their Star Wars films contrived remakes of the original trilogy counterparts is unlikely. I don't get the complaints that The Last Jedi was too different, given the plethora of parallels to The Empire Strikes Back and Attack of the Clones, much like Force Awakens has tons of parallels to A New Hope. So to hear pundits and bloggers convinced that Ryan was allowed to go off the rails from whatever the plan was, despite that Lucasfilm very publicly severed ties with many other directors over creative differences, makes zero sense. Sounds more like they didn't like it and are venting. For example, the cost benefits perspective makes no sense to part ways with Ryan Johnson for a plethora of reasons. Lucasfilm lost tons of money on Lord and Miller, lost money paying their employees to collaborate for years with Colin Trevorrow, and to a lesser extent, Josh Trank, and got nothing for it. Then spent an extra boatload of money they weren't planning on spending on Rogue One to save the movie, and had friction with J.J. Abrams over the fact he wouldn't bring the production of Force Awakens down to Disney Studios in Burbank or Lucasfilm in San Francisco, preferring to keep it in-house at his Bad Robot in Santa Monica. By contrast, Ryan Johnson was totally accommodating, traveling back and forth to both studios, gave them no headaches, and made them $1.3 billion to the pleasure of shareholders. Last Jedi also had tons of box office competition on the front end and the back end of its release, whereas The Force Awakens had zero competition on either end. Lastly, Disney can't afford to lose money right now after the Fox acquisition. Yet you'd be hard-pressed to hear any of this across any of the movie punditry sites or trade publications, as they all seem to be influenced by outrage culture. And again, this is all regardless of our opinion on these films. So what I'm getting at here is that all of these pundits and fans seem to be forgetting that it is not a filmmaker's job to pay off fan theories, and it's impossible to please everybody. Now, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of legit criticisms to go around for all these properties, but when people think that the corporate heads in charge of these properties will be influenced by these opinions, scares me a bit. Case in point, despite that I really was disappointed in Avengers Endgame since I thought the time travel plot was a cheap, uninspired cop-out and the victory seemed achieved too easily, I would never want the creative teams behind these things influenced by my disdain for a particular film, since fan opinions are all over the place. You can't please everyone. And the level that outrage culture has gotten to for many in movie news circles to interpret outrage as fact in ignorance of actual facts discourages me, since it sadly seems to be the new norm. You can read this letter and post if you wish. Thanks, and keep up the great work. Catherine Cook. Well, Catherine, what a great letter. I think here's the thing. The Last Jedi, I've been having these conversations with people. I like that people don't like it. I understand that. But like you had pointed out, the movie made $1.3 billion. It was the number one movie of the year that it came out. It was a huge success by any metric. And not before anybody says, hey, Force Awakens made $2 billion. The Force Awakens was an anomaly. It made more money than anybody ever expected it to make. So $1.3 billion is certainly a very respectable box office number. Now, the reason that fan outrage does not matter, and fan outrage, do you know what fan outrage is on the internet? It's free advertising. Game of Thrones is putting up its best ratings numbers ever. Last Jedi made $1.3 billion. Now, these are successes by any metric that Hollywood is really interested in. And when we're out bitching and moaning and complaining on the internet about Game of Thrones or Star Wars or whatever, you know what those are? Those are impressions, whatever you want to call it, out in the world, depending on what metrics you're measuring. People are talking about your product. You can't pay people to give you that kind of free advertising. The fact that we're still talking about Last Jedi 3 years after the fact or 2 years after the fact, we're still bitching and moaning and complaining about Solo. I'm still butthurt and angry over Star Trek Discovery, and I'm still here talking to you about all of these things. They love that. Outrage culture, it's terrific. Oh, although Gilbert doesn't seem to like outrage culture, do you, Gilbert? They love it. They love it. There's nothing that fans are going to say and bitch and moan on the internet about that's going to make them care one iota, because they're getting our money. We're buying these things. Now, it is true that Gilbert, why are you barking? I'm gonna have to give Gilbert cookies. So you want a cookie? Is that what you want? Are you bribing me because you know I'm on the air because he wants a cookie? All right, buddy. Come here. Come on up. All right, bud. Here, buddy. Huh? Yeah. I'm telling you, this guy, he learns something new every day. He's a very, very, very smart dog. Aren't you, buddy? Here, buddy. Okay, that's all you get. Now you got to stop barking, okay? Please, no more barking. All right? No, you get no more cookies. No more cookies for you, dude. Yeah. Here, bud. All right, buddy. Okay, you got to get John. You got to get John, buddy. You're good boy. No, don't bark. Anyway, so people are sorry about that little interlude. But Gilbert's part of the show, right? But the fact that we're talking about this, that we are filling up thousands of hours, millions of hours. Here's something I'll give you an interesting statistic that I find interesting. Over the last, there's like a bug in here. Over the last 28 days, my YouTube channel has over 2,600,000 minutes of view time. 2,600,000 minutes. Now, if you break that down, there's of course 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. If you were to do the math, it comes to 5 years. So in the last 28 days, if you just tally up the hours that people have spent watching my channel, 5 years of viewership over the last 28 days. All of it, for the most part, is talking about things that I don't own, that I don't make any money from. And it's whether it's Game of Thrones, whether it's Star Trek Discovery, even though I hate Star Trek Discovery, there's thousands of minutes of views and me talking about Star Trek Discovery on my own channel. Do you think CBS doesn't, that they're like, oh, I wish Rob Burnett liked Star Trek Discovery more? They don't care. All they care about is that we're talking about these things. It's amazing, and we're still talking about them. Now, Gilbert, please do not bark. He's not. It's just this dog. I'm sorry about that, everyone. He always barks when I'm on. He doesn't usually bark. He's silent all day. Gilbert, what is bothering you? What is bothering you, buddy? Come here. But so that they're getting all of this. Now, it is true that toy sales are down. A lot. There's different reasons. I've noticed myself that the only toys I really pay any attention to anymore are, in fact, hot toys or 12-inch figures. That's it. Gilbert, please. You got to not bark, buddy. Thank you, dude. Thank you. I very much appreciate that. You have to. So toy sales, as far as Hot Toys figures have gone, and what I've noticed is that the toys that they've made of the new figures across the board, from the new trilogy, beginning with Force Awakens, have not sold. They don't sell out the way other Star Wars toys from the original trilogy that Hot Toys makes. They're not selling out. So it's not, I believe that the sales of toys are down. But I also think that's because people have different Star Wars. There's Star Wars video games. If you're a kid, if I was like 8 years old, and I had Star Wars Battlefront, man, I don't know if I'd be playing with figures. I'd be playing Battlefront. I mean, if you can fly a photorealistic Millennium Falcon into battle, I spent a long time building my model of the Millennium Falcon. I spent months painting it and putting it all together. And then of course, it was the Fine Molds model. And then, of course, Bandai comes out with their perfect grade Millennium Falcon that's bigger, which I'd like to build. And one day I might, but I've already spent months building a Millennium Falcon. Do I really want to build another one? But so things are changing, and merchandising ebbs and flows, and maybe when episode 9 sticks the landing, if it does, it'll become more popular. But I just don't think that fan outrage is forcing or changing the decisions of the creators that are making these things. Because remember, the creators don't think they're doing a bad job. The creators are trying to do the best job possible. And Disney, in the case of, like, say, Rogue One, they saw that it wasn't up to snuff, and they did everything they could to make it better. Now, I would have liked to have seen Rogue One. I like Rogue One. I think the battle at the end is great. I like all the characters. I would have watched a half an hour more of character development and meeting all of those characters in their native environments before they all met up with one another. I thought that We just didn't get to learn enough about the rogue team, so to speak. But they're trying, these people, even with Star Trek Discovery, CBS hired Kurtzman and company, they hired Bad Robot and their secret hideout to make Star Trek Discovery. They're trying to make these things as good as they can make them. It is, however, it is the reason behind why these things are getting made in the first place. That's the problem. And the problem is they're now being, as opposed to, I've talked about this a lot, as opposed to a filmmaker wanting to make something and convincing somebody to give him the money. Now it's the money people that control the idea, and they're looking for people to exploit that idea. And they're looking at a spreadsheet like, oh, this director would be good because this is what they've done. It's in their wheelhouse. We think it'll go correctly. And they want to make the most money possible. That's the only. So Star Wars, which used to be the baby of one man, George Lucas, he controlled it all. He made it the way he wanted to make it. Now it's Disney's. Now you don't even have a human being behind the ideas. It's now a corporate entity that owns this IP, and the corporate entity's decision making is only about money. And outrage culture doesn't play into that. They look on a spreadsheet, they're like, wow, people really hate The Last Jedi. And look at how much they're talking about it. Our movie's being talked about all over the place. You know, I mean, maybe for a little bit they talk about, fan reactions and things like that. And everybody wants their product to be liked. But for the most part, I think it really doesn't matter. I've never heard of outrage culture ever influencing the fan outrage culture, fan toxicity ever influencing the outcome of something that gets made. Now, what's interesting, and I've said this a lot, I'm a huge James Bond fan. I have been since I was a little kid. And the James Bond franchise is a franchise that's very up and down in quality, which is strange to me because it's basically being controlled by one family since Dr. No in 62? And it's weird that we get Bond films of such varying degrees of quality. I'm surprised after seeing a movie like Skyfall, which again I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest, but to see it followed up by Spectre, and they're introducing Spectre and Ernst Stavro Blofeld, and the choices they made were odd to me. And I'm sure Sam Mendes, a smart director who gave us movies like American Beauty and Skyfall, that he read that script, especially the end, the climax of that movie, and said, yes, this is the kind, we're going to introduce Ernst Stavro Blofeld in grand fashion in Spectre. Well, that didn't work out too well. I mean, yet the movie made almost $1 billion. It's still very, very successful. I hated Spectre. I was so disappointed by Spectre, but they don't care about that. The movie performed. It was still very expensive to make. And there's things in Spectre that I enjoy. Like, I enjoy watching James Bond movies, even if I don't like the movie overall, simply because there's always a James Bond set piece usually worth watching. I loved the opening of Spectre in Mexico City, the Day of the Dead opening. I loved it. It's one of my favorite James Bond openings. Now, I felt this way about the Bond franchise, in that I've come to grips with the fact that there's good movies and there's bad movies in the franchise, and movies I don't particularly like. But I love James Bond. So I'll be the first in line to go. I'm excited to go to England to go see Bond 25, the same way I went to England in 2012 to go see Skyfall. You're all invited, by the way. First show, Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square. We can organize our ticket buying, because you have to get there when the tickets go on sale at midnight. It's 4:00 our time, I think. Well, it was in November whenever I bought the tickets. We got to coordinate those efforts. But so I'm used to the Bond franchise. Sometimes it's up for me, sometimes it's down. But I love the Bond franchise. I love Star Wars. I've loved Star Wars since 1977. And I was there opening weekend. I saw Star Wars, I think, 11 times in the theater first run. I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater. Return of the Jedi was a massive disappointment, so I think I only saw it 10 times. But I've always loved Star Wars. Now, I don't like Force Awakens. I like Last Jedi better. But this whole trilogy, the raison d'etre of this trilogy is to make money. And what they're trying to do, the whole creative impetus behind it was like, okay, We need to make this palatable for as many people as possible. And that's what they're trying to do. And The Last Jedi on a spreadsheet looks pretty good. The Last Jedi, Rogue One, and Force Awakens, pretty good investment. Even Solo, I enjoyed Solo. But it's not like the Star Wars franchise is hurting, despite what people want to say. And outrage culture, Game of Thrones, do I like what they've done with Game of Thrones over this last season? Well, no, but I can say I guess I've only disliked 3 episodes of Game of Thrones because I liked the first 2 episodes. I think what they did at King's Landing and all that, not so good. But I'll get over it. It doesn't change the fact that Game of Thrones has been an astonishing achievement in television, and it's amazing that show kept the caliber, kept that bar, that high bar for how long? So we have it, we have, and we might puzzle over it for years to come, but we still have so much enjoyment to be had from Game of Thrones. But yes, all this outrage culture. Look, I posted a video, this Tracy Ullman video about like a woke therapy group. I talked about it yesterday, and people came after me. People that I know and like and respect came after me and were like, "Are you making fun of people that want social justice in the world?" I'm like, no, I just posted a Tracy Ullman sketch. It's when it flitted through the front of my mind. It was tweeted to me by a woman of color, a bisexual woman of color who I like very much, sent me this Tracy Ullman sketch, and then I start getting yelled at by people that are saying you're not woke and do you not believe in social justice and all this. I'm like, dude, what I believe in is having a sense of humor and putting things in perspective. So outrage culture, I don't think it does have anything to do with what creators are doing. But remember, everybody's trying to make the best entertainment possible. They're spending so much money, and they're trying to do the best job possible. I think what's interesting is now we have creators involved in projects like, for instance, Star Trek. I'm sure some people that are involved, but to me, the thing about Star Trek is it doesn't work as a money-making proposition because it was always a niche thing in the first place. And they've been trying to turn Star Trek into something that it's not in the hopes that they're going to make more money with it. I think that's wrong-headed, and I think that that's where Star Trek is suffering. They're trying to make great Star Trek, but they're trying to make great Star Trek in a paradigm that isn't a Star Trek paradigm. And you're never going to win. You're never going to win. At the end of the day, you're never going to have longevity that way. You've got to create, and Star Wars, when you're trying to emulate or ape something that came before, you're also never going to win. You might win in the short term, like with The Force Awakens, but in the long term, you got to do something else. And that's why I'm excited for the Star Wars franchise, because The Mandalorian is something new. The Cassian Andor series, something new. And whatever the third Star Wars series is, I can't wait to see 3 live action Star Wars series. It's going to be great. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of outrage coming down the pike. But anyway, Catherine, what a great letter. And thank you for that letter. This next letter comes, I got to put my glasses on. This is a long one, a very long letter, and it gets a little dark, actually. But this is in reference to Ira Bear's Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Leave Behind. And as many of you know, there was a Fathom event Monday night where it had its world premiere in theaters for those who didn't donate to the project. And Shout Factory has agreed. They've acquired it for distribution, and they're putting it out on physical media. I thought it was a lovely documentary, a wonderful piece of work. Really enjoyed it a lot. So this letter comes from Taylor Marin. And greetings, Rob. I hope this letter finds you well. And if you wish to read part or all of it on the air, please feel free to do so. When I wrote you my first letter, I had only known about Robservations for a week and sent along a letter about Star Trek Discovery, I believe just past the midpoint of the season. I had a vague idea of what the show was about at the time, and have thankfully since stumbled my way past the event horizon of the Post-Geek Singularity to where I am now. It has been great to discuss everything from comic books and Star Trek to Bauhaus and Shriekback. Nice. I grew up in the Salt Lake City goth punk industrial scene. Think SLC punk in the 1990s. Actually, a lot of my friends were extras in the show. So I love it when you drop a musical reference like Bela Lugosi's Dead, or when you and I exchange a couple of comments about Shriekback's Oil and Gold during an episode. Thank you again for giving us the Post-Geek Singularity a forum to meet on a regular basis and get to know each other. I'm a huge fan. I mean, I'm less of a fan of pop music now, but my musical tastes were definitely shaped by first soundtrack albums. I was very snobbish as a little kid. After Star Wars came out, all I listened to were soundtracks. And, it was kind of funny. My grandmother's like, well, what can I go get you? And I'm like, well, I want the soundtrack for Capricorn 1. I want the Jaws 2 soundtrack. It was very funny. But I love music from the 80s and all kinds of music. I mean, if you want to have a discussion about Christian Death, the lineups of both Christian Death and the Damned to discuss what's more legit, or how their album Phantasmagoria is just a little too pop for the Damned. We could do that too. But I appreciate that you're a music fan. Last night, I watched What We Leave Behind, the documentary about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which I had been anxiously awaiting for months. I loved seeing the cast, producers, editors, etc. back together again and offer and share their deep and passionate feelings about the show, the characters, and hearing about the flack that they took for creating a series that wasn't well received. I had no idea that Deep Space Nine faced the kind of opposition that it did, because everyone I knew that watched it seemed to universally love the show. Perhaps that's because my friends and I were all a bunch of miscreants. I truly enjoyed what Ira and the rest of the team put together, including the theoretical episode of Season 8. They do. The writing staff gets together and they plot an episode of Season 8. I only wish that they had a television network that owned the rights to the material and would pick up on such a great idea. Oh, wait. I felt very touched as a veteran when Aaron Eisenberg mentioned how many times he heard from other former service members that were moved by the siege of AR-558 and It's Only a Paper Moon, because it captured the horrors of violence, combat, and PTSD. Star Trek also inspired me to join the service in the first place, a month before September 11th, 2001. I went through basic training in Cape May, New Jersey, and I'll never forget the searing hot day in firefighting school when training came to a halt to announce that the United States was under attack. The fact that DS9 and the other pre-Discovery series provided such an insightful treatment of social, societal, and universal issues long before the current and recent events that they so eloquently address continues to amaze me. Watching What We Leave Behind proved to be an absolute delight, especially when hearing from the characters, since they still clearly have a strong emotional connection to their characters in the show. Moving on, I wanted to briefly wander through the minefield that has become Game of Thrones. When the show first came out, I knew nothing about George R.R. Martin or his literary works. I decided to watch it after seeing all of the hype and hearing recommendations from so many friends that love the books. I watched the first season and part of the second, and then sort of lost interest in it. Through the palace intrigue, plotting, and the world were interesting, I simply didn't love it enough to invest myself in it. Over the years, I tried coming back to it a few times, but again experienced the same outcome. I simply couldn't invest myself in the characters or the show enough. This year, however, after hearing so much about the final season and having missed season 6 and 7, I decided to start over and watch it through. I did this because Game of Thrones has made such an impression in the entertainment world, and I felt as a fantasy genre fan that I should make an honest effort to at least appreciate it as a work of art. I would like to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I still haven't read the books, but I feel that distinction might bear some consideration since a large number of viewers haven't either. Anyway, about 2 months ago, I started over at season 1. As it turns out, the second time drew me in as a fan. One of the original issues I had with the show was the breadth of the ensemble cast. It became tiring at times to follow so much palace intrigue, shifting alliances, and trying to remember who was stabbing whom in the back and why. But watching back-to-back seasons in a short period of time not only piqued my interest, but drew me in more. I have found the show much easier to negotiate and love, especially without the season breaks in between. By the time I caught up with the show, it was the same night that The Long Night aired. I may be painting a target on myself while simultaneously falling on my sword by saying this, but I have actually enjoyed season 8 for the most part. I have heard the criticisms and agree with some while disagreeing with others, but I hope that I get a fair shake when I explain my reasoning. I also watched the episode breakdown about the long night and thought that the writers and producers did as good a job as they could creating a prolonged battle scene like that. I enjoyed the episode because we finally faced down this terrifying foe that's been looming on the horizon since episode 1, and inevitably, that particular storyline felt like it needed a conclusion. I have seen criticisms about Arya landing the killing blow, but I loved seeing it. She's essentially been evading death and training to be an assassin for a good part of the series. I expected Jon Snow to come rushing in to slay his implacable foe, but I enjoyed how he got pinned down when trying to do so. The killing blow may have been a bit anticlimactic, but I still found it to be compelling, which I suppose is how I would describe the episode for the most part, though it ended abruptly. Primarily, I wanted to address the bells, since a number of the channels I often watch have been foaming at the mouth with criticism about it. Between the long night and the bells, I feel like Dany's experiences both this season and those leading up to it have been overlooked. She finally arrives with her army to take the Iron Throne and discovers that the army of the dead has to be dealt with regardless of the battle against Cersei that she has given everything to prepare for. It served as yet another barrier on her road to chasing her destiny, and she lost one of her children again, and Ser Jorah, while fighting it. Then, while preparing to take King's Landing, she loses Missandei in what amounted to a casual beheading and watches another one of her children get shot through the neck by a scorpion ballista. Ballista. Moreover, her destiny now seems to be in question when Jon Snow's identity is revealed, which also puts an end to their romantic love, possibly the only positive thing she has to distract her from all the pain and the loss. By the time her army arrived at the gates of King's Landing, with 2 of her children dead, along with friends and advisors that she has come to love and depend upon, pain and anger would likely be her primary emotions. Her lover not only left her, but now poses a threat to her claim to the Iron Throne, and she's standing in front of a city ruled by a merciless nemesis. She has all of the reasons in the world to be totally enraged, distrustful of just about everyone, and her life is governed by fear. If I were in her place, this simply wouldn't be a battlefield. It would be the final conflict that everything has been building up to. King's Landing isn't just a city to her either. It's the home to the human corruption that has tried to end her life since birth, essentially. War, death, and loss change people significantly, and the degree of her suffering has been almost beyond measure. I know quite a bit about PTSD personally, and I know a lot of fellow veterans, men and women that do as well. I have seen people retreat into a state of rage and hypervigilance the way that we have seen her do between the long night and the battle in King's Landing. I myself have been there too, and some people struggle with it for the remainder of their lives, or take their lives to rid themselves of it. I felt very convinced by watching her expression of inner torment while sitting on Drogon's back, presumably reliving so many years of trauma compressed into a moment where the base urge to inflict vengeance took over. This army that has taken one of her children and a beloved friend from her in short order suddenly decides to lay down their swords when they know they've been defeated. In that moment when they suddenly decided to surrender to her, I wouldn't have bought the idea that her response would be to stop there and forgive all, because we've watched her transform into someone that would not likely choose mercy over punishing her enemies back. On top of that, she has the army and Drogon to exact that vengeance. From my perspective, Dany snapped in a very human way, which essentially distilled down to acting on that rage and vengeance. These human attributes are as old as humanity itself and certainly exist today. She alluded to the fact that she had nothing but fear in her life prior to the battle, which again, I can certainly relate to. Countless wars in our history often end in the massacre of not only the enemy, but those perceived to have supported the enemy. Heroic? I think heroism in war is entirely subjective. At the end of World War II, the bombing campaigns of the Allies destroyed Axis targets en masse, especially firebombing campaigns. Staggering numbers of civilians were blown up or immolated toward the end of World War II, and then we turned to nuclear weapons to compel Japan to surrender. Plans were in place to continue using nuclear weapons on additional targets if they had refused to surrender after Nagasaki. These decisions came from armies that had lived through years of the most horrifying warfare the world had ever seen, resulting in the deaths of millions, and were not only seen as the only solution to ending that war, but the right decision to end it. My intent is not to argue the ethics of World War II or warfare itself, but merely to point out the fact that it repeatedly brings out discussions like this in the history of the world. Some of the other geek culture review sites have been incredibly harsh in the wake of the bells and its battle, and certainly of Dany's character. While I agree with some of that criticism, I'm forced to ask, is it really so surprising or out of the realm of possibility? Again, not having read the books, HBO's presentation of Game of Thrones could be similar to how Peter Jackson portrayed the Hobbit movies on the big screen. I didn't mean for this to be such a bleak and dark letter, so please don't take it as a mirror into my own soul. In no way have I intended for this to be a carte blanche defense of the decisions made in season 8, but I wanted to offer an alternate view, which you, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity often welcome and can have an intelligent and objective discussion about. Thank you again for providing that forum, and as always, I look forward to the next episode. Live long and prosper, Taylor. Once again, that letter comes from Taylor Marin. First of all, Taylor, thank you. Thank you for writing such, a very thoughtful letter, sharing your experiences both as a fan and as a veteran. And, for too often, I think, and look, I too am a toxic fan. Certainly, and yet I try and hide behind the idea that I'm somehow more noble than other toxic fans because, I know better. I don't know better. I'm just some yo-yo talking on the internet. Now, I have spent 30 years working in the entertainment industry, and as many people are want to point out in the comment section, oh, really? I've had a middling career at best. Like, what have you done? What have you done for me lately? It's true. I'm not Steven Spielberg or Ridley Scott or even John Carpenter, one of my heroes. But I'm still out here swinging. I'm making a movie right now. There's always stuff going on. I have a short film I just finished. There's always things happening. And I do try and bring at least some kind of, I do think about these things a lot. And I do bring a personal and professional perspective to these things. But I am also guilty of being toxic in terms of especially what I think about Star Trek Discovery. That's why I'm always quick to say, look, there are people that are going to, I talked to someone today that was a huge fan. And last night at my birthday, we had some drinks and Elizabeth's friends came out and it was a very small affair. So if you're a friend of mine in the real world, I have not really had an official birthday party or anything like that. I don't think I'm going to, so no one missed out. But I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who really did love Star Trek Discovery with all of his heart, loved it. Has not familiar with the original series, but loves Star Trek Discovery. And he couldn't believe, he wanted to talk to me about it, how much vitriol and hatred I have for that show. But from his perspective, he loved it. He was coming at it from a different place than me, somebody who has 50 years of history with Star Trek. He doesn't have that history, so he's taking it on its own terms. And it always makes me realize that the way he's coming at Star Trek Discovery, there's a purity to it. There's no expectations. That he didn't grow up with the blueprints of the Enterprise spread out around him in his bedroom and spending hours and hours and hours dreaming about what it would be like to live on that starship. He didn't have that history. So and his history with Star Trek, which is not very long, is just as valid as my history. The point is that if we're going to have a conversation about it, and I can sit down and cogently and calmly discuss my problems with the show, while at the same time respecting and admiring his love of the show. I mean, it's not for me to try and change someone's mind and say, you're wrong. Because for him, he's not wrong. But what's important is that we can sit down together and have a conversation about it, a cogent conversation about it. Now, that's what I'm all about here. And I really appreciated this letter about Game of Thrones and where he was coming from, because I like when somebody, if I disagree with somebody or I don't share their opinion, I love getting an explanation, like the idea as a veteran to come in and come at it from somebody who's suffering from PTSD and all that. I think that's great. And that's what we need to have more of. And that's what I hope that the Post-Geek Singularity community that we've created here is all about. That I've had people send me letters about you guys, about people who I write as I read letters. I can't be in the chat room all the time, so I don't know where everyone's coming from. But it's nice that people write me letters and talk about you guys in the chat room. I know there's a lot of people like Crixus Maximus, who I'm seeing right now, Victor Acosta, Zach Losel, Roberto Suarez, I mean, and Vesna and Terry and the people that I've come to know, you guys make doing this fun, and that's what I think we need more of. There's so much toxicity, and there's so many things that divide us, when really our baseline should be, hey man, we love science fiction, fantasy, and horror in all of its permutations. You might dislike something, but after all, it's the genre that we love. It's the fantastic films that we've watched. I mean, cinefantastic. It's science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies and books, and some people know a lot more about this stuff than others. And that's another thing that always pisses me off, when a casual fan, somebody that says, I just discovered the MCU, like my friend Andrea Fiorito. I'm not going to suddenly come at Andrea Fiorito and say, well, here's what you don't know. I mean, she's never going to know as much as I do about this. She didn't spend 40 years of her life, if not more, reading comic books regularly. She can't be expected. But what's important is that I understand, if she's coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the first time, I can only be there to share my love. And when my friend last night was specifically asking me about Dennis, when he was specifically asking me about, by the way, Dennis was in the 5th season of The Wire, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. So Dennis always gets a break from me. But when we're talking about Star Trek, he was excited to share what he was discovering about Star Trek Discovery, and it bummed him out that I hate it. But I'm then curious to hear, and I didn't want to get into why I didn't like it, because he's liking the show. I'm more interested at this point in the conversation to find out what about it he likes, because that helps me learn, and I think we need to be more like that. And again, this conversation about Game of Thrones is a perfect example. Somebody who's suffered from PTSD, somebody who's in the military, who's seen actual war, understands Dany's point of view. Now, I'm coming at it from more of a literary standpoint, and that kind of a storytelling standpoint, where I didn't come at it from that point of view. But then again, I've never seen combat either. I don't know anybody that really was suffering from bad PTSD. So that perspective that I don't have, that someone else has, allows that person to enjoy something more than me. And that's okay. And we shouldn't be mad, and you shouldn't be yelling at people about this. I mean, I've always said to people, not only do I say that I always say there's two sides to every story. There's two sides to every issue. Like right now, we're seeing a real challenge to Roe v. Wade with the abortion issue. Now, I'm 100% pro-choice, full stop, 100%. 100% full choice, woman's right to choose, full stop. However, I don't necessarily think abortion is a good thing. I don't. I don't think it's a good thing necessarily, but that does not affect the fact that I think a woman should have a right to choose and run her own body and her own person the way she should. Nobody should interfere with that. Nobody should. I don't think any, and yet what's going on in the country, what's been happening, whether it's, it's in Georgia or Alabama or what, it's pretty scary, because what those things are doing is limiting a person's liberty. And that's scary to me, but we could have a long-term debate about, not here, but talk about abortion or something like that. But I would like to do it in a respectful manner with somebody. And that's what I think toxic fandom has done. People are yelling and screaming, saying that, I mean, ultimately you're yelling and screaming over a television show and it didn't go the way you wanted it to go. But if you're going to analyze it from a storytelling standpoint, that I think is one thing. But really, the vitriol that people are spitting at each other nowadays, it does get tiresome and bum me out after a while. I mean, it really does. But what he also brought up was, if you guys have not seen, I'm a huge Star Trek Deep Space Nine fan. And I actually watched a review copy of What We Left Behind. I didn't go see it in the theater. Thank you, Chris Gore. I really enjoyed it. It was interesting because, to be full disclosure, I mean, I spent 3 years of my life making Star Trek documentaries for the Star Trek Blu-rays, working for CBS, doing it between 2012 and 2014. So I was coming at it from like, would this have been the documentary? I mean, ours were more traditional. I thought what we left behind was, it had an untraditional yet traditional approach. It was wildly entertaining. It was moving. It was a great look behind the show and seeing the actors come back together again. if I have any criticism of it, it's that it didn't, because it was made by the people who made the show, it came at it from that perspective. There wasn't a whole lot of external analysis, but there didn't need to be. And I didn't think there necessarily should have been because of who was making it. But it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. And if you like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I highly recommend picking it up when Shout Factory releases it. It's really, really good. And I think everybody will dig it. So I highly recommend it. This is a change of pace. This is from Ken Dixon. It's a shorter one. Happy birthday, Rob. You and I are 4 days apart, and this Sunday is the big 5-0 for me. So I'm right behind you. As a birthday present to you as well as myself, I officially joined the Post-Geek Singularity as a hero. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you, Ken. For anyone who's wondering what they're talking about, I'm sort of moving over from Patreon, moving off Patreon and going on my website on the Burnettwork.net. You can also join my website if you want to support me that way. And we're having a lot of interesting stuff that's being developed that's going to be coming down the pike soon. So thank you for that. I appreciate that, Ken. I won't let this title go to my head, though. I also think you're responsible for another present, as I'm finally ordering my first hot toy. I just cleared the wait list for the Iron Man Mark IV with the suit-up gantry. What have I gotten myself into? Well, basically, what he's talking about, it's not just an Iron Man figure, it's the whole gantry that helps him suit up. That was before he had nanotech. It's funny. When I went and saw Endgame at the Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard in IMAX, they actually have that figure in a glass case, and they're doing a contest for it. It's an incredible piece. I mean, you didn't just, man, if you're going to go get into hot toys, you went big. That's a great piece. You're going to love it. You were talking recently about how Luke staring off into the twin suns of Tatooine is just as much Star Wars as a lightsaber duel. I agree. The prequels and other movies wouldn't think to have 2+ minutes of droids walking through the desert. Yet this gives A New Hope a sense of reality versus rushing from scene to scene. There's something to be said for subtlety and nuance, like the scene with the Emperor watching this opera, or wherever the hell that was, Revenge of the Sith. I love the incredible space battles and lightsaber duels, but I'm also very curious about seeing their day-to-day lives. Like, why couldn't the follow-up to Endgame be The Avengers meets The Big Chill? I would watch the shit out of that. Gilbert apparently likes that too. You have the perfect setting already with everyone at Tony's house, plus the MC. Gilbert, come on, buddy. You have the perfect setting Gilbert, don't do that. You have the perfect setting already with everyone at Tony's house, plus the MCU has Jeff Goldblum, William Hurt, and Glenn Close. Maybe she survived the destruction of Xandar. I say this with tongue in cheek, but I would still kind of like to see that. What do you think? Well, Gilbert, do you want to see that? Come on, buddy. Don't be barking. I love the idea. I've often said that I would watch, based on Avengers: Age of Ultron, that I would watch an entire movie of a dinner party where the Avengers just sit around and talk to each other. I love the idea of an Avengers Big Chill movie. What a great idea. For those of you who don't know, or who don't even know what The Big Chill is, The Big Chill is a movie from I want to say 1983. That was directed by Lawrence Kasdan with a great cast. In addition to Glenn Close, Jo Beth Williams is in it. Kevin Kline's in it. Yes, Jeff Goldblum is in it. Tom Berenger is in it. It is Mary Kay Place is in it. Mary Beth Hurt. Is it Mary Beth Hurt's in it? It's a great movie, and it was Lawrence Kasdan's follow-up to Body Heat. Lawrence Kasdan, he who wrote Empire Strikes Back and wrote The Force Awakens. And what's great about it, it's basically about a bunch of friends that, and William Hurt is in it. He said William Hurt was in it. It's about a bunch of friends that come and spend a weekend in their house after one of their other friends has committed suicide. And they were all great friends in college in the late 60s. And it's all about how their lives have changed since then. And it's interesting because it was a really influential movie for me when I was in high school. Believe it or not, when I first started in high school, and I loved it. It's a terrific. Gilbert, is there a monster in the house? Is there a creature? I don't know, But I really love that movie, and I highly recommend it. There's a great Blu-ray. Criterion made a great Blu-ray. Gilbert, please. Although I kind of do find it, I love the way he barks. I can listen to him bark all day. I know it's probably terrible for you. Gilbert, please, come on, buddy. Come on, dude. Come on, dude. Raven is here. Raven says, good evening, fellow imagination connoisseurs. Well, good evening to you, Raven. I don't know. Gilbert is clearly upset about something, and I don't know what he is upset about. Anthony DeRisso says, hey, Rob, I'm looking to start collecting some Hot Toys Hasbro Legends line, but I want to be sure I'm getting both from legit sources. Well, here's what I would do. There are two places online that I love. Actually, there's three, but there's two domestic places online that are totally legit when you're buying Hot Toys figures and Hasbro Legends lines. One is Sideshow Toy. I think it's sideshowtoy.com, Sideshow Collectibles. They're the American distributor for Hot Toys. So, and also when you buy them from them, they give you points, and eventually, like I got my Hot Toys Vision figure for free with points, and really like Sideshow Collectibles. They're a great place, great company too. I've watched them grow. Huge fan. Gilbert, please. What's up, dude? Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. So Hot Toys, Sideshow Collectibles. That's where you should get them. There's also Big Bad Toy Store. And I love Big Bad Toy Store. They have everything, not just Hot Toys figures. They have anything that you want, any collectibles or I don't know. I'm sorry about this, people. Gilbert, you have to calm down, buddy. It's okay. Something spooked him. You're spooked, bud. You're dude. So you go to Big Bad Toy Store. They also carry Hot Toys figures, and sometimes when Sideshow is sold out, they're not, or vice versa. But they carry everything under the sun. Robert Perez says, happy birthday to you and John Schnepp. For those of you who might not know, the great John Schnepp, who I did Collider Heroes with for 3.5 years. That was my first foray into the YouTube space. It would have been his 52nd birthday today. He passed away suddenly last July, and I miss him every day. So thank you for that. And Team Nerd says, comic book suggestion, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Baby Thanos Must Die. Insanely ridiculous, but so unbelievably entertaining. Oh, and happy belated birthday. Is that real? Is Cosmic Ghost Rider real? Baby Thanos Must Die? I will read that. I will get that. Brandon Valenzuela says, Gilbert is rampaging. Rampage. I'm sorry about that. He gets spooked. What can you do? You know, you live with a dog. Dogs sometimes get spooked. It happens. Travis Morrison McKell says, great work, Rob. Well, thank you. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate that. Mark C says, loved your Twitter exchange with Hector Navarro. I wrote you a letter explaining why his thought process is foolish. Okay, Hector Navarro started going after me when I posted that. First of all, I love Hector Navarro. Hector Navarro is on Nerdist. He's a frequent. He beat me. I lost the Inner Geekdom title to him at the Schmodown, and I love Hector Navarro. He's a really great guy, very smart guy, and he's very interested in justice and inclusion, and I really like him. But he didn't like the fact he kind of came after me for posting that I had posted this Tracy Ullman sketch about this woke therapy group, and I thought it was very funny. And I said, all of America needs to see this. I meant it very tongue in cheek, but he was not happy about this sketch, and he didn't like the fact that he felt that it was making fun of these real issues. And I'm like, look, these issues. Here's my problem with what I see happening on my side of the aisle, on the left. The sense of humor that people have is going away. And I think this outrage machine is just, it's grinding forward, and we all have to take just like what Alan Alda said in Crimes and Misdemeanors, which is, I think, my very favorite Woody Allen movie, that comedy is tragedy plus time, which I've always loved. I don't know exactly what that means, but if we can't laugh at ourselves and our own foibles, I think we're kind of in trouble. And I really do believe that. But I appreciate that you, Mark C., like the exchange. I tried to be respectful because I thought that suddenly it's very funny that when you want to talk about issues of inclusion or being woke or whatever, that everyone's sense of humor goes out the window. And I don't get that, because I live my life in a state of constant bemusement. Human beings are horrible, horrible creatures, but we can be great creatures too. But we do horrible things to each other, to the environment, to animals. We're horrible. But I also love humanity, and the heights that we can reach are great. But if you're not bemused, you have to be, but you can't take everything so seriously, because if you look at all of human history, we're a terrible, horrible people that deserve a virulent plague to wipe us from the face of the earth. I really think that. I mean, for the most part, probably so. But on the other hand, we've done great things and we have the potential to be great. And I would like to think that one day the human animal will evolve to the point where we're not killing each other and we're not defiling our planet. And the Trump administration is no longer, they rescinded protections against those species that are in danger of extinction. Like, why would you do that? It's kind of like particulate matter into the atmosphere. We live in a closed system. Why do you want to spew lots of CO2 into the air? Why do you want arsenic to be in the groundwater? How about none of those things happen? You don't leave your kitchen 10% dirty. Anyway, I don't want to get that political. But Willow Yang says, don't worry about the letter yesterday. It was my fault. I used the term so often at work that I forget regular people wouldn't know them. No, Willow Yang. No. Expect people to come up to your level. Don't bring your level down to the people, because I have to find these things out. So please, I'm happy you don't talk down to me. I learned something. Stubble McShave says, seeing Michael Mann's Crime Story with Dennis Farina, it's great. Crime Story was the show that Michael Mann worked on after Miami Vice. And yes, indeed, it's one of the great TV shows of the 80s. It might, as much as I love Miami Vice, I think Crime Story might well be a better TV show. It didn't run as long, but it was great. Mark C says, dude, I'm very conservative and I don't agree with all the stipulations of the Alabama bill. See, Mark C, who is very conservative, doesn't agree with what the Alabama bill is doing. I think that proves to me that, yes, we can have dialogue. The thing about it is that it's okay to be a conservative. It's okay to be a liberal. It's okay to be far left. It's okay to be far right if that's where you want to be. But at the end of the day, does our belief systems further humanity as a whole? That's sort of my, and there's parts, maybe not so much far right. I mean, being a Jew, don't have a lot of use for the far right. But for the most part, I have found valuable information from all political sides and things worthy of listening to. Roberto Suarez says, recently rewatched Thief based on your recommendation. My heist film recommendation for you is Jules Dassin's Rafifi. I own Rafifi on Blu-ray. It is incredible. If you guys want to see a great, Roberto is absolutely correct. If you want to see a great heist movie, man, Rafifi rules. And it's great. And Criterion put out a great Blu-ray of it. And I love Rafifi. That's a good call. Alexander Wilson said, I tried to tell you about the military component with Game of Thrones, but you said you can't equate it to real life. Yes, I can't. That's why I'm great to have a letter writer who actually could. But do I agree with that assessment? Do I agree that PTSD or do I agree that she can then go ahead and murder almost 1 million civilians and probably some of her own people? No. You're never going to convince me that actual plot device made sense, especially in terms of what she was after the whole time. She didn't want to be the Queen of Ashes after all. Doshi says, have you seen the Netflix series The Society? Now, I have not, but it's something I didn't know it dropped yet. If The Society is what I think it is, it looked great. The trailers for this show, The Society, I guess a group of teens, young people. It's kind of like Stephen King's Under the Dome. But these young people, their parents disappear, everyone in their town disappears, and they're like locked into their town. And then it kind of goes all off the rails when people go crazy, sort of or try and build a civilization outside with no checks and balances. And it looked cool. I wanted to watch it, and I will watch it. I definitely want to check it out, but I haven't seen it. Now, let's see. I have a few other letters that I want to read, and this is a really interesting letter. That it's a long one, but I want to read it anyway because I think it's cool. And this letter comes from David. He said, just read his first name, and his first name is David, as in the same name of Kirk's son, Merritt Buttrick's character. He says, read this live. If you wish to, just use my first name only. All right, David. Hey, Rob. Longtime viewer. Well, 2 months, but it feels like a beautiful lifetime of your talks. First-time writer. Prepare for the wordy, pedantic pontifications. I bet somebody in the chat just loved hearing that. Pedantic pontifications of just one quasi-nerd who loves all things movies, TVs, comics, and books in the singularity. I've never been compelled to write to you until recently, and why this letter is going to be long. It'll touch on many things you've given strong opinions on, things I agree with, like 97% of everything you say, and things I totally disagree with. Before I start, I have to say, Rob, your show, this community you've built, your knowledgeable insights into industry and comics, your passionate sweatiness for so much in this post-geek utopia, your positive, welcoming attitude, even towards people you don't agree with, and your very eloquent ways of deconstructing the problems in certain shows without just blindly calling them things like more inclusion, a social justice warrior agenda is truly unparalleled on YouTube. Well, thank you for saying that. I just, I can't think any other way. Your community is one of the friendliest, smartest, and passionate groups of sweaties I've gotten to be a part of since Schnepp, RIP, always reign on heroes, and those days will always be missed. What David is referring to is John Schnepp used to call all the fans that watch Collider Heroes sweaties, and it was a reference made with love to all of us who go to comic book conventions and comic book shops, and we're always sweaty with our passions, and mainly because we're overweight. But he meant it with love. I watch you every morning on Campia, the John Campia show, and though I love and respect the man a great deal, I find myself frequently telling John through my screen to shut his trap and let you give your insight already. Nothing against him, he's an amazing host, but too hyperbolic and inconsistent in his critiques of certain films. I know. A film is subjective, so he can't really be inconsistent, since often his opinions aren't really consistent among many of us, which is true. But what'll work great for him in certain films, he'll then rip apart in another movie, and it gets a little old. His nitpicking of Tony Stark's nanotech is especially grating and juvenile, yet funny at times, I'll admit, since he seems to completely misunderstand who Iron Man is. Iron Man is the Marvel version of Batman, a billionaire with endless resources, advanced tech from across the universe, an Einstein-level IQ, and the ability to figure out difficult solutions to difficult problems. The man had 5 years to study Thanos' gauntlet. He had access to a universe of knowledge through Thor and Rocket, and advanced AI able to help him in his work. Coming up with a working gauntlet, obviously barely working to contain the stones, unlike Thanos' gauntlet, or cracking time travel after years of studying once Scott gave him the final piece of the puzzle, was 100% believable in the context of the MCU. He's a genius engineer with the Bat's prep time ability in a movie filled with reality wizards, purple titans, talking trees, and raccoons, and finger snaps that somehow are the only way to kill or revive anyone in the universe with those Infinity Stones. It seems like John suspends his belief much further with DC, though I would never say he's biased against Marvel, since I can tell he likes most Marvel films. He's just very pro-DC, often giving them passes on things he would never let Marvel get by with. Despite his sometimes eccentric points of view and his dismissive attitudes towards his opinions on something like Endgame, he's still a great host, and like I said, always fosters great talks with you, Ashley, and the fans. Though, just to be totally honest, whenever I'm faced with the choice of his stream or yours, you'll win every time. Just wanted to get that out before I dive into the remaining 7 circles with you. Well, I appreciate you saying that. Star Trek Discovery, a show I've honestly avoided almost completely outside of the first episode that was free on YouTube, yet have watched countless reviews and breakdowns of and its myriad issues. A show I tend to disagree with John on as well, but his opinion to me really represents the casual viewer type that probably would have turned into this show and gotten a lot out of it. Behind a paywall, though, means it's mostly the fans paying to watch and not casual or even semi-big fans like me. Though Dune will always be my number one sci-fi anything. The fans this show has decided to ignore in its now second season voyage to rewrite and reimagine much of the canon and characters to appeal to a new audience in a modern climate. Fans that I'm sure are dropping like flies from CBS All Access, leaving a show with no general audience to watch, and a completely divided fan base already struggling from a decade of mostly being poorly conceived prequels instead of sequels that would expand the lore into new phases after Voyager. It's a sad waste of talent and resources, and while I have strong hope that the Picard series will be an interesting show, I do enjoy the premise I read. It's facing the same corporate interference and behind-the-scenes issues that have plagued Discovery from day one, so I may be waiting for reviews on that as well. I love Star Trek. I love the worlds and histories it builds. I used to love waiting for a new show to premiere and then continue Gene's vision, building upon a solid foundation. I love its perfect messages from a society able to grow past injustices of our past, then evolving and showing us how our society can reach that point with the right paradigm, giving us the freedom and peace to finally explore the cosmos, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Discovery, unfortunately, is going where every mediocre sci-fi story has already gone 1,000 times and brings nothing that elevates the lore as every past show has done. Even Enterprise, which wasn't a terrible show in the last season, stupid finale though, in my humble opinion, but Discovery has managed to completely wreck and divide a fandom that has been struggling for years and needed a real revival after Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond. Films I hate for what they tried to establish as new canon, though I'll be honest right here, I like JJ's 2009 Star Trek movie quite a bit. I know it's silly, full of real plot holes, unlike Endgame, and shits all over the canon just as much as Discovery. But for me, it told an interesting stories with characters that I bought as the crew of the Enterprise and action visuals that to this day look great. Yes, outside the overused lens flare. It was a good sci-fi adventure romp, not the best Trek true, but I'm very forgiving to canon changes if it's a good story with good characterization. I've never wanted to see any Trek fail. But maybe that needs to finally happen for a few years until someone passionate about the established universe can give us a true continuation post-Voyager with a singular vision. Well, I think that's what the Picard series is trying to be. The fact that they're trying to turn Star Trek, a niche, even by imagination connoisseur standards, property, into an overpriced blockbuster action show with no sense of verisimilitude to be found in most of the sci-fi concepts saddens me as someone who grew up on TNG, DS9, and Voyager, my top three shows, though I respect the original series and like some of it. Much just isn't compelling to me as a spoiled kid of the modern era of storytelling. What? No, just kidding. I feel like the stories in Discovery are weak, bargain bin sci-fi stories or the type of lazy, inexperienced fare you'd find in fantasy magazines back in the days of submitting sci-fi writing. Written by folks who don't care one bit about maintaining cohesion with anything that's come before, actually changing what's come before, and are far more concerned in what politically woke messages, many of which I fully agree on, by the way, political messages aren't the issue, they're hammering into the forefront and not worrying about coming up with great or even good sci-fi with truly compelling characters to wrap these ideas and messages in. It's all flash, though. I'll give a bit here and there and admit there is some heart to the show, and from things I've seen in clips and reviews, Michael Burnham isn't nearly as irritating as many make her out to be, in my humble opinion, and despite her insubordinate tendencies when dealing with Pike, the best Trek portrayal in over a decade, by the way, and a great character all around, which I agree with, she still strikes me as someone learning and growing. Though this Red Angel arc basically turned season 2 into a really bad comic book origin to me. So it's a shame her story is crap because I like her confidence and resourcefulness, and I think she could have had a very interesting story arc learning to work under Pike while developing a bond with her crewmates, helping us actually care when they're in dangerous situations. And by the way, where's the thoughtful and brilliantly written debates on war, interference on foreign planets, insightful looks into gender relations and roles, etc.? Yes, there's gorgeous flash and action, but it feels dull and meaningless in an otherwise empty show that's broken your axiom, since Enterprise, in my humble opinion, but perhaps you disagree, by leaving characters' interpersonal relationships, story, and vision behind for a boardroom exec decided show that's only purpose was to get people paying them to stream. I understand Hollywood is built of money and that the dollar rules all, but I can't imagine. With the disaster the show is to Trekkies, with the dwindling amount of support on streaming, no general audience tuning in, and a massive budget completely unnecessary for Star Trek, the show simply can't go on. They need to, in my view, hire people like you, Rob, or one man like you, or just hire you to come in as the Feige to oversee the Star Trek universe and course correct. No more prequels, no more rewriting history to send a certain message instead of just creating new history. No more sci-fi stories written by high school level physics dropouts who can't even write semi-convincing technobabble. Time crystals, spore drives. Is this Star Trek or Spaceballs 2, The Wreck of Trek? This show has tried to be as progressive or even more so than DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, the last show I hate with the same vehement passion of your hatred of Star Trek Discovery, but that's a letter for another day. But has objectively failed in every way to go about it in a way that's nuanced, really makes sense in a supposed far future utopian society, or that can really connect with its audience and grab someone who may disagree on politics, getting them to think differently about issues that may have never evolved until their favorite show, on which they have never evolved on until their favorite show presented a philosophical or moral dilemma and used it to give them new perspectives through character growth or in the story. Discovery hammering messages home with no nuance or story is off-putting and doesn't change hearts or minds. Like I've said, by and large, I agree with the politics talked about as so-called social justice warriors, as so-called social justice warrior anti-white agendas, which is ridiculous to say, obviously, but you can't make a successful show of any sort that relies solely on inclusion and identity politics to drive its plot and characters forward. Do better, Star Trek. For your remaining fans that still want to see you succeed and grow. Well, I was going to move on to The Last Jedi, a movie I love and will defend to death outside the valid criticisms and issues I agree with. But wowza, this is getting longer than the God Emperor ended up having to live as a worm to save humanity, and it's starting to get light out. Didn't expect to sit here for hours writing this at night, but inspiration waits for no man to sleep. Whether or not this makes the show, Rob, I hope you enjoyed reading a fellow imagination connoisseur's breakdown of a show I'm sure you agree is breaking down, dead in space with no Captain Marvel to bring it back. I only wish. But alas, I won't waste more letters or time bashing a show I hardly anyone watches and even fewer legitimately enjoy. If you do love Discovery, by the way, don't worry. I can totally respect and understand it. I'm happy people have found some good things in this series, and even I see redeeming qualities. It's just not meant for the fans who've been here since Kirk, in my humble opinion. My hope is for Rob to either go Feige on Trek or them, and a proper series made for the fans. Too many studios seem to see fan service as negative, but serving your fans should be priority number one in every franchise. Still, you can surprise and subvert it when it fits the story you're telling, but fans earn those moments in great films and TV shows. Marvel really is the model, Endgame being the culmination of years of hard work and tying up threads from 21 movies made for 3 hours of the greatest fan service moments ever put to film, in my humble opinion. That movie will be discussed sometime when I have more freedom to write another novel. For now, Rob, I hope I didn't put you or anyone in the chat to sleep with my quiet ranting, and I hope this letter or dissertation, as it's become, finds itself worthy of your time. Keep up your awesomeness and your work, my friend. Have a great and special birthday, and do a shot for us. Just stay safe. Your nerd in geekdom, David. P.S. Let us know when we can pre-order Tango Shalom. I can't wait to support my main man in getting some cheddar. We need all this money to pay off for our hot toy purchases in the next 2 years. This was a long letter, but David, I want to thank you for that letter. And it fits into some of what the other letter writers were saying, especially about the idea of toxicity in fandom. Here's what I don't understand. I watched an episode, I think I talked about this yesterday, of the Twilight Zone, the new Twilight Zone, the new CBS Twilight Zone, called Not All Men. It's the latest episode. I think there's a new one out, but this was last week's episode, Not All Men. Here's the plot. Meteors land in this town. They pollute the water supply, infecting the water supply with something. I don't know if it's disease or what. And all the men in the town become bloodthirsty rapist murderers. And the women are not affected. And that's it. That's what it's about. And the men go on a rampage. And I was watching this, and it's called Not All Men. It was written and directed both by a female writer wrote it, and a female directed, woman director. And I watched this show, and I kept waiting. I'm like, okay, it's Twilight Zone. I understand what they're going for. It's called Not All Men. I get it. But now what insight are you going to give me into toxic masculinity? I mean, literally, this was a disease. Everybody, all the men caught toxic masculinity, all of them, everyone in the town. And I kept waiting. I'm like, where's the insight into this? There wasn't any. At the end of the episode, it's just all men are basically toxically masculine, and they're all just one step away from becoming rapist murderers. And I was watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, all of the great stories that we read, even Shakespeare, they're all stories that have to do with the human condition. And usually stories are, even Stanley Kubrick, a lot of people called him a misanthrope and that he didn't like people, and because of his movies and the subjects he covered. I've always thought the exact opposite. I think Stanley Kubrick loved human beings, loved the human animal, but he also was, as I said before, that I am bemused by the folly of mankind. All of his movies, he wants the audience, I think, to take away from his films. When you're watching Barry Lyndon, which I adore, or you're watching Dr. Strangelove, or you're watching Lolita, or you're watching The Killing. 2001's different, but he wants us to take away from these movies. Don't be like that. Be better. You the heights of what we could do in 2001. We can transcend. We can go through the stars. We can move beyond Jupiter and beyond the infinite, and we can evolve into the Star Child. I mean, that's what he really believed, that humanity's future was in the stars, and I think he was optimistic about it. He was a documentary photographer. He started as a documentarian when he was a teenager, and his photographs were amazing, and he loved people. I think he loved what humans could do and create. And I think the problem that I have with Star Trek Discovery is that Star Trek, to me, along with the Twilight Zone, Star Trek and the Twilight Zone shaped my entire worldview about everything. And there's a lot of Twilight Zone with the O. Henry stories, but a lot of the Twilight Zone had these incredibly heartfelt stories about the human condition and loss and mourning and growing old and wondering about your place in life. And there was, for the most part, there was always something to be gained from a Twilight Zone episode. There was always some meaning behind it. And the very best Twilight Zone episodes, and I think the very best stories, if you want to have a social justice agenda, there's nothing wrong with that. The world needs social justice. They do. But the great stories have those elements baked into them. You don't need to put your social justice message out at the forefront of your story. It should be inherent to the story itself, and that's what the reader gets to experience. I mean, whatever it is your agenda is about, you don't want it to be didactic. And I feel like now that's what we're getting. The great stories are fallen by the wayside. I mean, that Twilight Zone episode was shameful. I thought it was shameful because one, it besmirched the legacy of the Twilight Zone, and it was completely this agenda-based story that basically was saying to me as a male viewer, like, look, when it was over, I was like, wow, that was just a bad episode of the Twilight Zone. I'm not going to get angry about it. I'll talk to you guys about it, but it didn't make me angry. It just made me sad that much time and money and effort. The show's a beautiful looking show. It's really well made. Was squandered with basically men suck. I'm like, that's not. It's like when you sit down with a fan or a friend and you're just like, fuck you, your ideas are stupid. That is counterproductive. You don't get anything from that ever. And it bummed me out that that's what the Twilight Zone is now all about. And there's a few episodes I haven't seen, so I'm going to go back and look at them. But man, it bummed me out. It bummed me out that a show that has meant, I don't know how many people still watch Twilight Zone, but it means so much to me. It really means the world to me. And yeah, I loved it. I loved it growing up. I still love it. I watch them again and again. The Blu-rays are spectacular. Totally great. Alexander Wilson says, what's funny is that Alan Taylor said George R.R. Martin told him the story was really about John and Danny in season 1. It looks like that is coming to fruition. That might be very true. Again, I don't know. I mean, look, after what I saw, if I was making Game of Thrones, I would just have Dany win. She would be sitting there. She would take the Iron Throne, and whatever's going to happen in this next episode, I don't know who's going to die or who's going to live. And she's like, all right, let's move forward. That would, I think now people believe that she's going to have some kind of comeuppance because of what she's done. But what if, in Game of Thrones style, what if she didn't? The real question that I would have then is that now that she's won the Iron Throne and there's no one left to really oppose her, are we going to get down to business of rebuilding the city and create a world, a more just and verdant world? Are we going to do that, or are people just going to turn their backs on her and go away? Or is Arya going to kill her? I don't know. But if I would end the show today, I'd be like, yep, so I just committed mass genocide. Never forget this, because I'll do it again if I have to. But let's get back to the business of building a world that's a better place to be. I wonder. Maybe. We'll see. Aaron H. says, have you seen Mindhunter? If you guys haven't seen Mindhunter, first of all, I will watch anything to do great. I love great serial killer stories. Always have. Mindhunter was like catnip to me. I loved it. It's about the beginning of the FBI's profiler division, where they actually hunt serial killers and try and figure out their behavior. Mindhunter was a wonderful show. It was beautifully made, impeccably acted, because David Fincher was involved. I dearly loved it. So yes, big fan of Mindhunter. And yeah. Suthius says, hey, Mr. B, how much wick dipping are you planning? Well, I am, for those of you who might want to know what he's referring to, I am seeing John Wick in 3.5 hours here in Poseidon. Oh, dude, I can't wait. And I'm going to do a lot of wick dipping tonight. I expect my wick to be quite frothy by the end of the evening. I can't wait. Are you guys going to see John Wick? Are you excited? Yeah. By the way, I'm not on the John Campy show tomorrow morning. It's Friday. So I was going to go to Houston, but unfortunately Booker T has banned me. I was going to be my team. I'm the manager of Drew McWeeny and Andrew Guy's team, The Family, on the Schmodown. But I've been told I can't go to Houston, which was unfortunate because I really wanted to see the shuttlecraft from the original series, which is at a museum in Houston, which I'm now no longer going to go to do because Booker T has banned me, which is too bad. But anyway, I'm looking forward to, I've got some work to do. I got to do some Tango Shalom work before. By the way, Tango Shalom is going to be finished sometime in June, maybe toward the beginning of July, and then I can talk about showing it, but we're going to start sending it to festivals and all of that. So it won't be done until then because a lot of people have asked. So thank you for that. I'm going to end this chat and bring this craft in for a landing. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for everybody who wrote me letters. Please write me letters at theburnettwork.net. You can go there. You can support the channel. You can see I love what the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery is shaping up to be. Please send us more pictures and really like having everybody participate. And it's great to have you here. I love the community. And of course, everybody else loves the community as well. Let's see. Mukbang Review says R&B needs to be in Houston. What the fuck? Yeah, man. Booker T. I got banned. Which bums me out. Yeah. The Alltone says, Planet Houston, we will go there to rule. That's a Superman 2 reference. Boy, do I love Superman 2. But it's a little hard to watch. Brian Eng says, Star Trek Picard seems like an odd title. I'm not sure what would be better. The original Star Trek series had some of the best titles. I mean, and I got to give it up for Discovery. I think their titles are kind of lame, but they have better titles than, say, The Enemy or The Chase, which we frequently got with Next Generation. But, I mean, Star Trek, the original Star Trek had series titles like Requiem for Methuselah and Is There in Truth No Beauty? These are episode titles, not the titles of the show. Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. I mean, these are great titles. Star Trek Picard, I mean, I understand it's about Picard, but it's not a very grandiose title. I'd like to have a better title. So, but I'm not going to get mad about it. I won't get mad about it until I've seen the show. And then I'm either going to like the show or get mad. I already don't like the fact that they're using outdated uniforms, but that's just me. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to end this chat, and I want to thank you all for being here. And it's great having you. And apparently, as you've heard from the letter writers, a lot of people like this community that we've built together. And I want to thank everybody for being here and for the continued support of the channel. It's a lot of fun. I will be back tomorrow. I don't know when. I think I'm going to do an early chat. I might even have Lucas Kendall, the director of Skyfighter, here with me tomorrow. We shall see. But anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I want to thank Lucky Tiger for their ongoing sponsorship. Lucky Tiger for men who want to look good and feel great. You can go to their website, getluckytiger.com, and punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity when you check out for 20% off your order. And with that, everyone, I will bid you good day. And as always, have a better day. I'll see you tomorrow.